everything tonight to hand sew it basically because it won't take me that long, and I can sit and finish the stitches a little bit nicer later. But just to go to show, this is just one of those easy things just about anybody could do. You don't have to have a sewing machine, although obviously that makes it faster. Um, Needle and thread works just fine. So for the purpose of tonight, that's what I'll be doing basically. But we've got the materials list. We've got about a yard of I've got fleece here. You can use any fabric you want, really. Reasons I like fleece, it's really warm and it's not going to fray like a woven fabric is. You're going to get your edges and they're not going to just fall to pieces in those little threads. So even for a beginner, it's very friendly. You don't have to sew up your hems. You don't have to worry about it falling apart like that. You just want to make sure your seams for your hood and then around the neck are all you're going to have to actually sew unless you just feel like making it look nicer. Um, so those are some of the reasons I like fleece. And it's very warm since you usually want a hood over the cooler weather. So bonus there for the fact that it's going to keep you a little bit warmer. Hello, who joined us? Somebody joined us. Okay, then. Okay, so I've got my yard of the fabric. We've got measuring tape. I use chalk, but they also make all kinds of pens, pencils, that kind of thing that you can use to temporarily mark fabric as you're working with it. That will just wash out later. This will just basically brush off. Needle and thread, already mentioned that. And of course, scissors that you can use with this project. And then some way to tie the hood. And you can use a button, you can use ribbon, just a few inches of ribbon to sew to either side so that you can tie it together in a bow. I've got this little fake looking bear claw plastic. It's pretty cool, but that'll be my button for today. I'm going to go with the button method, but you could do either the button or the ribbon. Just about as easy to do one over the other. So to get started, we're going to roll out our fabric. So let's take this apart here. And you're going to usually find it folded this way. We are going to unfold it from its typical yard and fold it long way. And I'll show you what that's going to look like here in just a second. Okay. There we go. Now folding it long way is really what makes us be able to make this out of 1 yard of fabric because it is a limited amount here. And we want to make sure that we have enough fabric that we can get. You're going to need a big, it's mostly going to look like a big circle for the parts that's going to go around your shoulders, your neck, and then the hood, which we are going to need to cut while it is folded in half, as you see here, because you're going to need two pieces, one for the left side of your head, one for the right. So this ensures that we can efficiently use the fabric that we have access to. So we're going to start with the hood pieces. Our magic number here is 18 inches on your measuring tape. Now you can go a little bit bigger if you have the space to do so with whatever kind of fabric you picked out. But 18 is going to be kind of the square that we're going to work within. And the reason for that is that 18 inches high leaves room at your neck going up to the top middle of your head and will allow the hood to be bigger than necessary. So you get a little bit of that draping effect, that kind of, a little bit of a baggy hood. That you see in most fantasy media, Lord of the Rings and that kind of thing. And then 18 inches deep is also going to be, enough room for your head before it bows into the hood shape in the back. And again, leaving enough space that it's that nice baggy effect. So I'm going to try to keep this straight as I go. We're going to start marking our measurements now. Now you can, like I said, you can make it a little bigger. I'm going to go ahead and make mine just, it looks like about 1.5 inches bigger. to make room, just because I have the fabric available, so no big deal here. Start marking what will be the top of this particular hood. Let me make sure I'm getting in there. So if this is the bottom where we're going to have the parts of the neck, this is going to be the top. So I am going to measure about how high I want it, and then again 18 inches deep. I might go 19 and a half, 20, just to make my amount of space I'm using even. So I've got a mark of chalk on my fabric at the back. You want to make sure you can at least see it. I don't think you can see it too well on my camera, but mark where the back of your box that you're working within is going to go, and then mark the top. The basic shape you're going to want for your hood is a letter D. I think mine's going to come out backwards just the way that the camera is seeing it, but you get the idea. One side is going to be flat. This is the opening to your hood. And the other side is going to be a large curved shape, making sure that we leave room at the bottom to be flat. So we're actually going to leave, let's say 10 inches here, because it'll be 20 once it's doubled over. We're going to make a mark at about 10 inches. This might be overkill, but it's much easier to trim than to have already cut it off and not be able to put it back together afterwards. So we're going to go from about 10 inches at the bottom where you had intended for your neck to be. Give it an inch or so. So this is going to mark a big flat kind of a platform. And then we are going to start making that curve generously to the back line of the hood that you made earlier. And I'm doing what I can with the chalk here. I don't know. I can see it fine, but I don't know how well it's going to show up on the camera for you guys. So you want to make a big curved line. This is where your letter D kind of comes into play. Making sure you leave plenty of room at the top to be flat. The top of your hood. And we might be trimming away back some of the front here, but it's always good to have at least a little bit extra. We want to make sure we have plenty to work with as opposed to messing it up later. So now you should have your big curve. The front is flat, about 18 inches or so, and then about 10 inches for the portion that will be your neck. I'm going to go ahead and cut mine out now. You're going to get a good look at what the shape looks like when I can pull the rest of the fabric away. So if you're following along, feel free to start trimming on your chalk line or whatever line you were able to make for yourself. And show you the rough shape here shortly. Okay, this is about what we're working with. We've got our front, our curve, and that little lip at the bottom makes some space for your, this will go around the neck portion. Now you might also have used the folded side of your fabric for part of this. I have where the neck section goes. I'm just going to cut that loose because it's going to have to be open or there's no way to get your neck into this piece. So now we should have, since the fabric was folded over, the left and right sides of the hood portion of your fabric. Is everybody good so far? I can wait just a minute for those following along. Okay, as far as I know, you're the only one following along. So we're going to go ahead and move along. So we've got our hood. We're going to set that aside. Now we've got the rest of that fabric remaining. From here, we're going to cut a big half circle ensuring that the side, the flat side of that half circle is your folded over edge, because this is what will make it a continual circle. Once you're done with the cutting process, we'll unfold it and then it'll be a big circle. So make sure you've got your flat side that you're going to start your circle on, your half circle is the folded side of fabric. If it's the cut open side, you're gonna have to sew that together because we need that attached. So for starters, the magic number here is going to be 14. If you can get, which you should be able to based on the measurements of your hood, but if you can get this, your measuring tape to reach 14 inches across, that's what we're going to use for the base of this hood. So I am just going to lay mine down straight against one of these edges, and just at the 14 mark, I'm going to make a little dot with my chalk. This is going to help me remember, okay, this is where I'm starting my measurements at. So from 14 inches out, I can now start measuring just by moving the measuring tape a couple inches at a time, but keeping my 14 on the chalk dot I had already made. I am going to start marking myself this half circle. Going to take a second here, so bear with me. This part doesn't have to be perfect. It's not going to be so noticeable that if it's not perfect, people will be able to tell once the product is finished. It's just not something that you're going to be able to notice. The thing I like about this project is it's really easy, and no matter what you're wearing under it, it kind of accessories can really elevate a mundane outfit into looking like actual garb, because this kind of cowl hood thing is not something that you walk around everyday life with. Okay, so at this point, I think you can very lightly see it, but if you've got your chalk semicircle drawn, we are now going to go back to the dot in the middle of the fabric where we started those measurements. And right now our magic number is 6. We are going to make another half circle in here, only the purpose of this one is going to be neck space. This is pretty roomy neck space, this one. I find that it allows you plenty of room if you're wearing like a scarf with it, other garb. As we know, armor can be bulky. So this is going to be a very roomy neck hole. So with that in mind, actually, if you would prefer it not to be so big, maybe go with more like 4 inches, 4 inches for your semicircle for this portion of it. I like the 6. I'm going to go with the 6, but 4 is completely acceptable as well. Okay, so now we are actually done with the chalk for the night. I'm going to set that aside. But what we now have is our 2 semicircles drawn out, and we're going to cut those both. Again, make sure that the folded side is this flat side, because we want to be able to open this up into a donut. You should have a little bit of scrap fabric there. I find it's good to make hand warmers. You can make belt pouches. But a yard is plenty to make this hood, as long as you have cut it in that, or folded in that elongated way, rather than how you're going to typically get it cut off the bolt at your local fabric store. Okay, at this point you should have your donut. Opening it up will reveal the circle portion. Now I know we said we wanted to have this on the fold so that when you open it up it would be round. We are going to cut it down the middle in one place. That's going to be decidedly the front opening, and the reason that we needed a fastener of some kind, be it ribbon, um, be it a button, what have you. So I'm going to go ahead and do that right now, but that means that the rest of it is continual. That's going to be our the body of our hood, and now we have definitively what will be the front and therefore the back of the hood to work with for the next steps. Now here's where it gets fun. We're going to start the sewing process. So if you are using a sewing machine, you are going to want to take your 2 hood pieces now, because that's what we're going to start with. If you are sewing it together with needle and thread like I am, go ahead and prep your needle. I am just going to do a very quick whip stitch that can be easily fixed up later. Might even be able to just go to my sewing machine and run it closed. But for the purposes of this video, I'm going to show you how to do it by hand because not everyone has access to a sewing machine. While I'm threading the stupid thing. Any questions so far? You guys are so quiet.
Sorry, I was trying to get my volume to work. I don't know why it didn't.
Oh, no, it's all good. Are you using the machine tonight or are you hand sewing it? That's the easier way to do it. No, no, fair enough. And I totally get that. It's definitely easier on a machine, but it's not impossible without it. So I figured I'd do it this way just to help those who don't have a machine or don't know how to use one. So since you will be using machine, you are probably already about ready to go, and I'm just now getting my knot in my stupid thread. Um, there we go. So you now have your hood pieces to assemble together. You're going to want to start at the neck portion. I find that's easier because then you know when you're done. You don't accidentally sew the wrong side. Like I've accidentally sewn the opening together before. Definitely don't do that. Bad move. You're going to start sewing at the base of what's going to be the neck and just go around that curve. Now, some fabrics are going to feel like they have an inside and an outside to them. If you have a certain side of your fabric you would rather be the outside, now is the time to make sure you're putting that together correctly. So let's say mine doesn't really matter. This is the same inside and out, but let's say I wanted this to be the inside, the nice, or the outside. I mean, the side that was on the surface. Let's say I wanted that to be on the outside. Well, I am going to want to sandwich the 2 outside feeling pieces together. This is especially important if you've got like a patterned fabric. Some of the fleece comes in just really, really fun patterns, and you might want that to be on the outside and not the inside. Because some of those, it's pretty obvious which one was outside and which one's inside. And then it would be just like that. I would just put it right back together, but with the outside sandwiched in the middle. So now I'm going to go ahead and just do a quick stitch through the back of the hood, starting at the neck. If I was taking my time, it would be a lot prettier. This is just going to be the quickest of whip stitches. Don't even worry about it. If you're following along at home and this takes a little bit longer, the next steps are pretty easy and you won't have a problem just remembering to do them. This is the worst thing to sew together, honestly. So we're going to start here. And if you've got that started, then you're all good. Whoops, get those scissors out of there. Make sure you're keeping the layers of fabric even together as you go. You don't want one to get pulled away from the other and then you're all kinds of mixed up when it turns out you've been only sewing through one layer and not both of them. And if you're sewing by hand with the intent of it just being hand sewing, I hope you have your stitches a lot closer together than I am right now. This is just for teaching purposes. I'll probably have to go back over it later. But for the moment, it's going to work just fine. And it would function for a while, but eventually that thread's going to pull apart and wear down faster than if I had put them together better in the first place. So it's always better to do it right the first time than go back and be repairing your garb after it feels like you only just made it. So this is the boring part. This is the part Alro is going to cut out later. I think I'm going to have quite enough thread, so I'm going to grab a little bit more. I'm going to go ahead and knot this off. But we are over halfway there, so I'll be there in just a minute and then we can move on. We've gained a few more as the evening went on. Anyone but Arlo joining in with the materials? Nope, good enough. Oh, I said, is anyone else other than Arlo joining in with materials? I'm taking the deafening silence as a no. That's okay. It's pretty easy to follow along with later, so even if you're not doing it right now, it can be picked up. And you can DM me if anyone's got a question.
I was going to say that I may have the materials, but I am not coordinated enough to sew, so I always like to try to learn something and see if there's an A&S thing that I can learn and actually do.
Fair enough. This is actually a pretty good beginning sewing pattern because we're really only sewing two parts, which you can even just like I'm showing right now. I'm just doing it by hand, and this would be fully functioning. We're sewing the back side of the hood, the curved part, then we're going to sew it to the neck, and that's going to be it. That's the only real sewing commitment to this one. And if you've chosen a button, you'll need to be able to sew a button on, but that's it. Okay, let's get this whip stitch back in action and get done. I'm sure Arlo's already done on the sewing machine. Give me 1 second. So the next step after you get the two hood pieces together, making sure you've got your inside and outside how you want them to be, you're going to want to turn it right side out so that this ugly seam portion is going to be facing the inside back of your hood, just like it would if you were wearing a hoodie with a seam in the back. It's going to be, this ugly seam is going to be on the inside, not really showing. So nobody's going to see that. It doesn't matter how neat of a job you do right now. Another thing to note, if you didn't choose a fabric like fleece that does not fray at the sides, if you did not choose a non-woven, you may consider either putting a little bit of fray check on it, which is a glue-like product you can find in the sewing store, the sewing aisle of any grocery store. It wouldn't be that hard to locate even outside of like your craft store like Joann's or Michael's. Fray check will help those ends not just go wild and come loose in your project that you worked so hard on. So that's something to consider too. Okay, we've got our hood. It's sewn together. I am going to turn it right side out, which you guys on camera aren't going to see too much of a difference, but if you're following along, you're going to tell that the better seam is on the outside now. So now we've got this neck portion that we want to attach to your donut. Again, if you've got a right side and a wrong side for this project, you're going to want to know what side you're working with. So go ahead and have that right side, the outside, up while we find the center back of this donut part. You're going to put your two ends together of the cut opening. You're going to fold it in half and you're going to pinch it right there. We are going to know that this is the center back of your neckline. So to match that, we're going to take the back of the hood and put it there as well. Now, again, make sure your nice proper outside fabrics are sandwiched together. They're facing together. And so what you're going to put on this right now is the ugly inside is what's going to be facing upwards and facing you. And now it's time for some more sewing. If you're using a machine, you might want to put a pin or two in it. Actually, I'll go ahead and demonstrate that right now just so you can kind of see how it's all laying out. We've got the center back of our donut. We've got the center seam of the hood. And we're going to go ahead. It is going to go around a little bit of a curve. This is not too difficult of a one to sew. It's going to go about halfway around the circle. Thanks, Alexa. It's my son's bedtime. Just ignore that part. So you could put a couple of pins in it if you were going to sew it. This isn't too bad of a sewing part. I know curves can be intimidating. This is a very big curve on a very forgiving fabric. So that's something that you're going to not really have as much trouble with as you would, say, if you were trying your first curve on cotton, taffeta, silk, um, something else with a lot more movement to it. This one's going to be a lot more forgiving. So once you've got that in place, just go ahead and do another stitch. Here I am going to do another whip stitch. Gonna get that knocked out, hopefully very quickly. And then I will be showing the button. You will be able to do it as 2 pieces of ribbon if you would prefer to have a ribbon closing on your hood. I like the button because you can find some really fun ones out there these days, and it definitely helps pinpoint your aesthetic, whatever class you're going for garb wise. My fingers do not want to thread this needle tonight. Okay, there we go. I know this is the exciting part. Okay. I'm going to take my pins out because I am not machine sewing this. I'm just whip stitching it again. You guys are welcome to do whatever you're comfortable with. Now I will say, if you have not chosen fleece, you will want to do something or other with the outside edges of this piece. Um, and even if you have chosen fleece, you can if you want to. You sure don't have to, because again, it's not going to fray. But like the outside of this circle is not having anything done to it. The outside front of the hood is not having anything done to it. And you sure don't have to, especially if you're a beginner. Like, just don't worry that hard about it. And using fleece, you're not going to have any fraying. It's not going to do that to you. But if you want to, you could certainly do a very simple rolled hem, or one of those nice blanket stitches you can find if you're doing embroidery. Those will make it look more finished and catch any loose threads if you're using a woven fabric. But you sure don't have to do any of that stuff. I promise. I am not as fast by hand as I used to be. And I'm definitely going to assume the folks following along with the machine are going to beat me out here. So I will wrap this up quick. Okay, and cut her loose. All right. At this step of the process, you should have your hood, the body of it that'll go around your neck and shoulders. Plenty big hood, nice and big and baggy. This is going to feel really cool out on the field. And it's going to stay warm, and any of your gear is going to fit under it. So now what we have left is the front. So if we were to open up that donut shape, ignoring the hood, you should now have the hood sewn onto it. It comes about halfway around. You can now choose how and where you want to put your closures. If you are using buttons, I like the option of overlapping the fabrics a little bit. You could even do double buttons if you want to. I'm just going to do one. If you were using ribbon, I would sew the end of your ribbon or cut a small hole and tie your ribbon wherever along this you want it to go. I am going to go ahead and do the button though. So what I will be doing is starting by very last time I have to sew, but sewing my button on where I want it. And luckily this is a much faster process than stitching across the entire thing. There's the end of it. So I'm going to put my button on real quick. And then you're just about done here. So we're going to get our button on, and we're just going to cut a small, just big enough for the button, but a hole in the other side of the fleece where you want the button to come out from. Yes, this is a little bit basic. We're using a non-woven fabric, so it's not going to tear apart. The buttonhole won't. I mean, eventually over time it might stretch, um, but really this isn't going to give you trouble for a while. And for if you're just a beginner starting out, no one necessarily expects you to have like the best garb. I know veterans who still use terrible garb. So really just whatever you're happy with and comfortable with. And this is an easy item to make again. So when your skills improve, feel free to remake it and maybe be even happier with it. Maybe be able to embellish it a little bit better because you've grown and have more tools in your skill set to make it even better than before. So, but I'm just gonna put this on pretty basic through the hood about where I want the button to exist. Make myself a knot. Cut it off. All right. Now, let's say I want my button to go through about here. I'm just going to snip about the width of what it's going to take that button to go through the hood. And ta-da! I now have a hood that will close, that looks class specific enough, maybe a warrior, maybe a rogue, a ranger, a scout, whatever. Something that will close, something that's warm for the winter. But like I said, you could finish off the edges if you wanted to. You could trim this down a little bit if it's a little bit wider than you really wanted. You could roll hem and make the hood part look nicer, but really you don't have to do any of that stuff. This is a really good beginner piece, and it will help you stay warm on the field. So ta-da, that's what I have for the hood class.
Very nice. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I hope it helps. And like I said, my DMs
like
are
it.
open if anyone has questions. Arlo, how'd yours come along? Okay. No, fair enough. Just if you have any questions, I'm still here hanging out.
Hi.
Hi.
My little overlord wanted to say hello.
Hello.
Well, hello, tiny noodles.
I am a creep baby noodles.
Don't listen to him. He's just a little hyper before bedtime.
That's fair. Mine's about to go down, so I get it. Good luck keeping him under control in the other room, Thane.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.
He's cheesy smiling right now.
Good night.
No, I think we're good. I got it all in there. Yeah, basic hood. Real good for beginner sewers.